the left takes another L. Now, there are some people who, you know, perhaps don't think deeply enough, and they look at a video like this and they say, in this moment in time where fascism, blah, 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 you are punching left. Well, interestingly enough, usually when that statement is made, it is more or less true because it's either being pointed at someone who's bad faith pointing left or punching left, or someone who is ignorantly pointing left. This is neither. Now, I'm going to explain a little bit more about that later, but let's first of all talk about my argument that basically Dr. Fauci is a win for the right. But before we talk about that, let me give you the perspective. So, how is Dr. Fauci a win for the right? Because Dr. Fauci lied, and I called it out when he did. And I recognize this not because I was listening to the dishonest propaganda in the right-wing media trying to smear him because he was seen as a liberal hero. So, liberals are sort of supposed to be the bad guy. So if the liberals like this guy, he must be evil. And also the anti-establishment rhetoric, go with your gut. The experts, right? So that is a good grift. People made a lot of money off of that. So he was an obvious target, right? But like with many times with propaganda, it's not just about lies. Good propaganda, when I say good, I mean in terms of effective propaganda, is based on truth. You start with a kernel of truth and you spin a mile of lies, an inch of truth and a mile of lies that you make from that. So generally speaking, I think in most cases, when you see right-wing nonsense spreading around, it's not completely nonsense. There's some truth in there, right? But the net effect is a lie, basically, because there's so much distortions and manipulations and stuff in there. So the net effect in terms of what do I get from this information? After hearing this right-wing narrative, what is my perspective? Your perspective is inaccurate. Your perspective is in believing something that's actually not true, right? So it's like the fact that there's some truth in there is almost irrelevant. But Dr. Fauci definitely lied, and I picked up on it just based on the thing that I try to teach my viewers, which is to think critically, get out of the tribalism and the echo chambers. With all the lies and scams and grifts, it's really unacceptable to not be super skeptical, like in general, when you hear some rhetoric, wherever it's coming from, whether it's your tribe, the other tribe, mainstream media, it's just unacceptable at this age with AI, and it's so much stuff is fake. All these influencers on steroids trying to teach you how to look like them by doing exercise, which is not, that didn't work for them. They had to use steroids. So it's like, you know what I mean? Everything's so fake. And yet some people just lack skepticism. So I have a healthy dose of skepticism. So me on my own, just watching the information being presented, I saw red flags in how things are presented. So specifically, the talk about the masks, right? There was some stuff that Fauci said that didn't make any sense at all. I didn't understand the full context until afterwards, but there was clearly some deception going on where he was saying basically masks don't work, and then he says masks work, basically trying to protect the supply of masks. But regardless of the intentions behind it, he lied, right? And by doing so, he gave a win to the right because they were able to expose, see, we told you, the experts don't trust the experts, right? Because that's what they do. They're really good at. They take one little thing and they spin it as if that's the whole thing. So now, because Dr. Fauci lied about one thing, everything else he said, disregard it. Everything else that any scientific institution says, disregard it. It's all nonsense, right? You're supposed to trust them because they're the experts, and look how they got this wrong. And we, just a YouTuber, I'm just a comedian, and I knew. You know what I mean? Like that's if you're partisan tribalist, you don't see it. But if you think objectively, it's a compelling argument, right? The idea that some random YouTuber got something correct, and then this is like the top expert in our government or whatever, and he was wrong about something. It's compelling, and it can suck you in emotionally to where you get so focused on that that you don't see all the other stuff that Fauci said that was correct, all the other things that Fauci did that was correct. You don't see that. You just see he lied, he's a liar, and these YouTubers are the ones who were saying that he was lying, right? And you were told, don't listen to them because they're propaganda. And now you find out, no, they actually were telling the truth about this thing. So what else are they telling the truth about, right? And then this gain of function stuff. I mean, even the arguments that were being made to defend natural origin versus lab leak. And I don't know that it was a lab leak. I'm leaning in that direction. A lot of the evidence seemed to point in that direction. But again, thinking objectively. If you're not thinking objectively, you see this establishment, Fauci and mainstream media saying, they looked at the virus and they see that this couldn't come from a lab because they see signs of it coming from an animal or something like that. And I always said back then when they said that, right? I said, what if the animal came from a lab? I don't mean came from a lab, but you take an animal and you take it into a lab and you do stuff with the animal, right? You inject it with different things and whatever. So truthfully, your output came from an animal, but that animal was manipulated in a lab, right? Now, I'm not a scientist, so I don't speak with authority on that, but I speak with using critical thinking to understand that the fact that this argument of we see signs of it come from an animal was stated as if it's the end all be all. That is suspicious, right? Because even without me not knowing everything, I just know that on its own doesn't stand the test of time. And I know to any critical thinker, they're thinking, what if the animal was in a lab, right? So for you to put out that narrative and not address that like preemptively, I was just like, what are we really doing here? But most people, if you're on the left, you're liberal leaning, you're seeing Fauci saying this, you're seeing establishment, saying this, coming from, the scientists or whatever, right? And you just go along with it. You don't think for yourself and try to think objectively. Like what I'm being told doesn't make sense because yes, you should trust the science, right? That's a little meme on the right? Yes, we should in general trust the scientific community and what they're saying, but they're humans after all, right? Humans can be corrupted, humans can be wrong, right? So just because they're saying something, I guess what I'm getting at is there's no excuse for you shutting off your brain, right? Yes, trust what these people are saying, right? But don't not think like they just say, oh, it didn't come from a lab because we see animals, whatever, and you're just like, oh, okay, and you're just nodding, right? I mean, that's the same kind of thing you say Trump supporters do, which they do, right? It's like Trump says something and it's like, but here are you doing the same thing, right? Now, I hate to make the comparison because it's quite different, when you're having this trust from an institution that's earned that trust versus people trusting Trump who hasn't really earned that trust at all. But it's still that same kind of a tribal thinking where you're just kind of going along and you're shutting your brain off and just like, oh well, they're saying that. So my favorite YouTuber on the left, a progressive, is saying that it's nonsense that it might be a lab leak, right? And the lab leak was another L for the left because any critical thinker trying to understand this for themselves would have done what I did, right? I said, okay, could it have been from a lab leak, right? I didn't just recognize that the main people saying lab leak were a bunch of morons, were a bunch of liars, were a bunch of propagandists, were a bunch of spin doctors. I didn't just stop there and say, okay, this is a bad faith group of morons, which they were, right? That was very true. I agree with them on that. But just because of all that, it's like a drunk man could be on a train and say drinking is bad, right? Just because he's drunk doesn't mean he can't say something that's correct, right? So I put aside my feelings that these guys are a bunch of morons and liars. I put aside my feelings about they are saying something that I don't know if it's true or not, But the conclusion they're coming to, definitely, like, yeah, I'm dismissing your conclusion. But the evidence that you use to come to your conclusion, I don't know about it. I don't know. So my first question is, I'm looking at probabilities, right? What's the probability of it being a lab leak? So I went and did research about the frequency of lab leaks. So I wanted to at least get a sense of how often do lab leaks happen? Why do they happen? Blah, blah, blah. I quickly found out that lab leaks are way more frequent than you would like to know. Now, your typical mainstream media news, progressive media, far left, whatever, you would never hear that from them because almost none of them took any time to think critically and look into things, right? But here's the problem. And obviously right wing does this all the time, way more, right? It's not about a competition, right? Let me summarize and do a rebuttal to the I'm punching left mentality. I am a winner. I've been a winner for a very long time, right? From when I was in high school, and it wasn't always that way, right? I had a tough time. I wasn't doing my homework. I was hanging out with the wrong people at some point, but at some point I shaped up, right? Won the science fair like 2-3 times in a row, right? I had local companies. There was a local what was it? What was that? Like a local refinery or something that was trying to see if they could give me a job as a high school student. I was too young to even get the job. Like I got their attention. I had companies, in the US reaching out to me, right? My first job after high school, I was recognized by the owners of the company for my contribution. My contribution, dating myself, was the internet. I basically took up on myself to build their first website at a time where most companies didn't have websites. And I made the company global basically overnight. Because back then, that wasn't a thing. Right? It was a big deal to be global. Most businesses were local, right? Because you didn't have the internet to be able to send email and websites and all this kind of stuff. So we were generally, our customers were just local people. But once I built the website, now I had people, sending orders from all over the country and the world, right? And for contributions like that, I was recognized, right? I just started running a year ago with my badge. I'm winning races, first place, second place, right? I am a winner. I know how to win, right? And if you want to win politically, maybe it makes sense to listen to the guy who knows about winning. And let me tell you a fundamental thing behind winning. And I'll use it from the running framework, how I think about running and how I win races. You don't let anything slide. You don't let anything slide. The devil's in the details, as they say, right? You don't let your opponent get an inch. You gobble up every bit of advantage to your side, right? So, for example, I saw a video recently where there was a debate. I think it was a debate. It was a conversation about RFK was being interviewed, right? Talking about measles, the measles outbreak, right? And he says to like a MSNBC or CNN reporter who says something about, she says like, all this measles happening under you. And he says, well, actually, Dr. Fauchi said in his diary that the measles, COVID is going to lead to more deaths from measles outbreaks because of the kids missing their vaccinations than the COVID virus will be, right? I'm pretty sure almost none of the liberals or progressives or whoever's watching this soaked that in at all. They probably just dismissed it outright, right? But because I live in reality and I want to know truth, I was skeptical because RFK Jr. is a fraud, right? Let's not kid ourselves, right? You shouldn't trust anything this guy says, right? But when he makes a statement like that, he says Dr. Fauci says that, I can easily check, right? And the fact that I'm going to be the outlier to actually check and see, did he actually say that? while a bunch of liberals and progressives don't care to look up. They don't care to know the truth, right? Or they don't even. It's like in one ear and out the other. Like it's that bias, right? So I looked it up. It's true. Dr. Fauci literally said in his diary that you're gonna have more deaths from measles because of kids missing their vaccinations. Remember what I said about winning, where you don't let your opponent get an inch? That's an inch, right? And there's so many times where the left does this, right? And they think it doesn't matter, right? Yeah, the people that I beat in races, they think that the drills I do don't matter. The drills or whatever. They think that the care that I take into my diet, exactly how many carbs, right? How many hours before the run I take my fuel, like I'll be fine, right? I talked to my neighbor some run related stuff, and he's like, I was running and I was having like a pain or something. And he's like, that's fine, right? Those are the people that are behind me, right? If you want to be behind the right, I mean, you see how much power they have? Then take things for granted. Like, who cares? Oh, so what? Maybe Dr. Fauci said that or whatever, but they're still wrong on this and that and that. Listen, man, that's not how you win, right? The way you win is by not giving your opponent an inch, right? Like the last race that I did, I told you guys a story already where what was the deal? I lost my key to my truck, and I started the race late, and I still won first place. How did that happen? It's not because I'm so fast, right? It's because I don't have an attitude of like, whatever. So Dr. Fauci said that. Okay, fine. But the right is wrong about this and wrong about that and wrong about something else, right? If I had that attitude, I would have lost, right? Because I wouldn't have taken the level of meticulous care in terms of my planning, my strategy, like going to the location ahead of time, mapping it out, right? I was so prepared that even starting late, right? People running off and I'm tying my shoes, I still won first place. So if you believe that this is such a critical moment, right now, that you would say to me, how dare you punch left in this moment? All the energy should be going towards, pushing back against fascism. You don't know how to win. Because I would use that argument to say now is exactly the time to be doing what I'm doing. The left cannot afford to let anything skate by. You can't afford to let anyone, fall through the cracks in your coalition, whatever you're trying to build, right? You've got to be 110%, right? You can't, on one hand, believe that fascism is so dangerous, but then on the other hand, take less care in terms of fighting back than I do in terms of winning races. Like, what does it matter that I win a race, right? What does it matter? Something as trivial as winning a race. I mean, it's not trivial to be able to win it, but the actual winning of the race, like, that doesn't really accomplish much. I don't get any money for it. The idea that I take more care into that than the left takes in terms of winning against fascism is actually doesn't make any sense, right? It's like, kind of imagine we're in a war with the robots in, what is it, Terminator, right? And you got a bunch of people who are being real sloppy. They're out there on the battlefield with no armor. People on the battlefield, they're supposed to be looking out and they're texting on their phones. And I'm sitting there saying, guys, we can't do this. We got to put your armor on. You got to pay attention, whatever. And then someone's coming to me and saying, dude, civilization is under attack from these robots. You need to spend that energy attacking the robots, not attacking our own people. If you believe that things are this serious, and I do believe that that's serious, then you would support someone pushing for people to be at their very best. You have a very difficult challenge. I'm pushing for you to go to a higher level than you are. And that is being seen as being counterproductive. That is also a lack of vision and foresight. Like many people, stuff that I've accomplished, they'll be like, oh, you can't. I've been told so many times, you can't do that. That's never going to happen. And I do it anyway. Lack of vision, right? The lack of vision has you so focused on, we got to fight back against Trump and get Trump out or whatever, right? And then you push these DSA people into office, right? And they do a lot of really good things, right? Historically, they're amazing compared to people in the past. But in terms of meeting the moment, right? The moment needs this. DSA delivers this, right? I'm pushing for DSA to deliver this, right? People are mad at me for pushing DSA to deliver this. Because again, lack of vision. They see this compared to previously, this is what we were getting, right? We were getting this before, now we're getting this. Yay! But the gap between what we're getting and what we need, that's where the right-wing cult, that's where those folks get in and win, right? You win at the margins, right? Every little thing that we're not doing, right? That I'm pushing for, and people are saying, why are you pushing left? Every little thing that you're not doing, that's a vector for the right to get a win, right? Oh, you were wrong about Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci was right about the measles. And then we tell you it, and you're still ignoring it. You don't believe in truth. Boom, right? How many people who went along with the narrative that Dr. Fauci was pushing, that you were hearing on progressive media, hearing mainstream media, how many people were hearing that, and one day they're going to run into Ben Shapiro video or something, and you're going to hear for the first time Dr. Fauci said this thing about measles or whatever. Everybody else that you trust is saying the opposite. They're saying the measles is because of whatever. And by the way, I'm not trying to say the measles outbreak has nothing to do with RFK Jr. He's absolutely part of the problem for sure, right? But don't get too sidetracked on that. The point is that there's this huge fact that he pointed out that we're going to have more measles because of the lockdowns and people missing their vaccinations. This is a fact, right? And you have it being hidden from half the country. And then the right wing, that's a vector for them, like, just like these snakes to jump in and jump on that, right? So you put out this video, you say the left was lying about this and whatever, and this is what Dr. Fauci actually says, and a fraction of people see those videos and they're like, oh shoot, nobody ever told me about this. I never heard about this. Wow, I just went along with the mainstream narrative, and now I'm learning that actually Dr. Fauci himself said we're gonna have more whatever, and now they're not. They're trying to put it on. Man, these people are dishonest. Tell me, Ben Shapiro, what else are they lying to me about? Now that person is a Ben Shapiro watcher or a Stephen Crowder watcher or a Tim Pool watcher, and because of the way we operate as humans, because they were burned on this one detail, they turned their back on the side they were listening to, right? And now they just focus on whatever they're being fed, right? So whenever they're being fed lies, they never get the reality of it being lies, because the side that's saying that, hey, that's a lie, and putting out the proof of it, you're not watching them. You're not trusting them now. You have your back turned. Now you're just like, Tim Pool, tell me about the liberals and how they lie. Man, yeah, that's right. I used to be a liberal, and then what changed me around? I remember that thing about measles, and then what do you think is the cause of that? Did you know that Dr. Fauci said what or whatever? That's not true. That's not true. Look, here it is. It's in his diary. Oh, wow. Now I've converted somebody else. The devil is in the details. If you want to win politically, you cannot afford to give your political opponents an inch. Do not give them an inch. In the world that I would have, in the country that I would have, the way the politics would work, the left would have recognized that Dr. Fauci was lying about stuff. They would still defend that, for the most part, he was on the right page, but they would know all of his faults, right? They would know about this measles thing right away, right? So when a right winger comes and tries to be like, oh, did you know whatever? Your audience member is not so easy to be a victim and to be manipulated because no, I actually heard about that on the Majority Report. They talked about this. I know about that. I know that Dr. Fauci said that. But do you know that blah, blah, blah? As opposed to them schooling you, right? And if you're honest enough to actually confirm whether what they're saying is true, you'll see, wow, they're actually right about this. Wow. Why didn't anyone on the left say this? Wow. Right? And that is how, like a virus, the right wing is able to pull people to their side, and win. If you want to win, don't give them an inch. Don't give them an inch. You got to be relentless. You got to be all about the details. You got to be willing to push your side harder. And you got to stop looking at things historically in terms of, this leader, Mandani, is much better than any leader in my lifetime. Who the fuck cares? I mean, yes, it's good that he's doing great things, whatever, but he's not meeting the moment. He's not meeting the moment. And all that matters right now is meeting the moment. Because if you don't meet the moment, you know what's going to happen? The roller coaster, right? You get some wins with the DSA and the Democrat Socialists, whatever. And then because they didn't meet the moment, the right wing took advantage of the pain of people who are not being addressed, issues are not being addressed, and they're able to rise to power again. And then we have President Green. So you can focus tunnel vision on Trump and this and that and fascism. I'm looking way ahead. I'm looking decades into the future, right? You focused on winning the next election, getting a Democratic president in office, right? I'm focused on, if that happens, that it doesn't end in some crazy Republican after their term because they didn't meet the moment. They were just competing with people who are dead or people from the past. Meet the moment or lose.